guy, he's a liar, but his lies are about to make him rich. Let's call him Francis. And Francis is 16, he's from New York, and he can't stay out of trouble. He's always lying and stealing from his parents and stealing from local businesses. But then one day, he commits forgery, and he gets arrested. Here's his mugshot. And after he's bailed out, Francis goes on another crime spree, and he eventually steals a car and flees to California. And then a few weeks later, he's arrested there. And they send him back to New York, where he has a bunch of outstanding warrants. And then, back in New York, Francis uses a bunch of forged checks to purchase an airline pilot's uniform. Because he thinks if he dresses like a pilot, which is a well-respected job, businesses will be more likely to trust him and cash his fake checks. But this plan doesn't really work, because he gets arrested for trying to use stolen checks, and he spends the next 2 years in prison. And by the time he gets out, he's 19. And a month later, he's arrested again in Boston for trying to steal a car and writing more bad checks. So they send him back to prison for another year. He's 20 now. So he eventually gets out and continues to be a turd. He gets that old pilot's uniform he bought and he uses it to scam a few free flights from the airlines. Because I guess off-duty pilots get free flights. But then he gets arrested in Baton Rouge for stealing a bunch of checks from a family who was trying to help him. And from there, he eventually flees to Europe. And there, he's right back to stealing cars and cashing fake checks in France and Sweden. And then he gets arrested in France and he's deported back to the US. He's 22 now. And now that he's back in the US, surprise, surprise, he goes right back to dressing up as a pilot and cashing more forged checks. 4 months later, he's caught and arrested again. And while he's in jail, he escapes. But within a few days, they catch him again trying to cash yet another forged check. And this time, he's sentenced to 12 years in prison. But a few years later, he gets out on parole. Then he's arrested again, this time for stealing art supplies and cameras from a children's summer camp. Here's his mugshot. And so at this point, Francis is around 26. And around this time, he moves into his parole officer's garage so his parole officer can keep an eye on him. And it's here that it finally seems like he's starting to learn his lesson. Until Francis is around 27 at this point, and he decides to start his own anti-fraud consulting company. And he starts holding these like crime prevention seminars where he gives speeches. So he gives these speeches and he tells everyone he's a reformed criminal. But he doesn't just tell people about all the check fraud and stealing from people and dressing up as a pilot to get free flights. No. Instead, he starts making up these fantastical stories about how from the age of how he had pretended to be a lawyer for another whole year, and how he faked being a sociology professor at BYU for a few semesters, and that he stole $2.5 million from the airlines, and that the FBI had been chasing after him for years and he made some kind of daring escape through an airline toilet. And all of these stories are bullshit. I mean, these aren't just small embellishments. These are